Hey everybody, welcome back. I know it's been a little bit of a longer hiatus. Well, not long, I guess 2 weeks. That's kind of normal as far as hiatuses go, but welcome back. Good to see you. Hey Howard, good evening to you too. Hope you had a great weekend. And welcome back, Dr. Jaws here. Tonight is going to be a special episode that I've been really looking forward to. This is a episode on North American shark culture. So this is actually the first of a two-part series talking about how North American shark culture has evolved pre-Jaws and post-Jaws. So in Jaws, the movie, the 1975, I mean, we all know Jaws, but the 1975 Steven Spielberg movie, I think is a really good dividing point as far as like kind of how we understand sharks today. Because prior to it, there was one kind of understanding, and then after it, it's really affected and was kind of like a watershed of just shark science, shark culture, kind of how we see them. So today is the first part of the series where we're focusing on the past. So North American shark culture as it relates to anything prior to 1975. So before we get started, hope you had a good weekend, Howard, and hope things are going well. I hope it's warm up there too. It's really starting to kind of warm up down here. So we're starting to see like a little bit of change shark wise. Definitely more change terrestrial wise, but it's still, the water is still pretty cold down here in March. But white sharks are starting to kind of like starting to look north a little bit. They're still kind of in the Carolinas area. Like they usually are in Florida in the winter, but in the Carolinas or in the this time of year, they're kind of like hovering around the Carolinas. And then we have some smooth hounds potentially coming in. So it's like still really cold, but water is changing. But hope things are going well. And I think what we'll do as far as starting out for tonight is I'm going to give a brief overview of my understanding of North American shark culture, like North American shark past. And then, oh, awesome, beautiful up here, awesome. So glad to hear the weather's nice. I don't know, we just did daylight savings, and just the longer days, the brighter days, it feels really good. So, I'm going to give a brief overview of kind of my own understanding of North American shark culture, and I have this beautiful engraving of a mako shark. So specifically a short fin mako, Isurus oxyrhynchus, from I want to say it was the early 20th century. But I'll give a brief overview of my understanding of it, and then we'll kind of have a second layer down looking at a NOAA summary of how shark culture has kind of developed in both North and South America. And then we're going to get into some real deep dive stuff with this amazing article by Castro. Jose Castro is one of the foremost authorities on North American sharks, and he has a really cool article on just kind of the history of science and just our understanding of these animals and culture as far as these animals in North America. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. So I think I won't have much to add. Just from my understanding, one very exciting, not well-known fact is cultures of the Americas, at least in North America, on the East Coast, they had a pretty interesting interaction with sharks, where they were very much aware that sharks, of course, were in the area. Or near where they lived, both living and fossil sharks, where living sharks sometimes they were used as resources. Fossil sharks, tribes would find shark teeth, especially in the kind of the sandy coastal plain of the East Coast of what would today be United States, and maybe parts of Canada too. You can actually definitely parts of Canada, because you have Joggins fossil cliffs, but they would find shark's teeth. And there was an interesting understanding that, okay, these teeth are, some of these are very large and they're very dark in color, whereas living shark teeth is white in color. And there's this really interesting kind of understanding that this is the same object but it's changing color, and it symbolized a transition from life to death. Shark's teeth were incorporated into burial rituals with different cultures. We've found artifacts of fossil shark teeth with holes drilled in the center that indicate that rope or thread was strung through them to be adorned as necklaces. So there's been some speculation that these shark teeth have been used for shamanic rituals. Sometimes they can be associated with great import or protection for people who live by the sea or who go out into the sea to fish or perhaps hunt for whales. And then what's also interesting is that on the east coast of North America, there was a very extensive trade network that incorporated many things like Roanoke or like shells, but shark's teeth were actually traded, and some teeth have been found even all the way up in the Mississippi Valley to Mississippian cultures in what is now like the Midwest. So it's kind of amazing that there's already this layer of interactions with materials relating to sharks. There's already been a layer of interactions with sharks because sharks, are coastal animals, and they are very much a part of early fisheries on the East Coast. On this channel, we've touched on some West Coast relationships with sharks. You can see sharks incorporated into totems in the Pacific Northwest, northwestern cultures. There's a famous headpiece that depicts a dogfish, and that's used in certain cultures for rituals as well, which is pretty cool that both coasts had some relationship with sharks. Because when we think of shark culture, like Aboriginal shark culture, we typically think of Polynesian culture, where sharks are regarded as gods of and also regarded as transformative beings, where they were once humans but are now in this other realm, in this other entity. So there's this really interesting primal relationship where sharks have been treated with respect and almost like with a supernatural reverence. So that's kind of sort of the, and in Europe too a little bit, but it depends on the area. But in North America, there's that baseline of kind of understanding. Fast forward to more so, I want to say the 18th century and definitely the 19th century. In the 18th century, we have the beginning of classification of Linnaean taxonomy, and sort of the beginning of really organizing life into or looking at life in a way that is more orderly and kind of grouping things or grouping animals and plants into similar categories to kind of help get a better understanding of them. So Carl Linnaeus invented taxonomy, and some of the very first things that were named were actually sharks. So some of the earliest sharks that have ever been named are the white shark. That's pretty sure. And actually, we could see that. Let me pull this up. I should have brought this up. In good old Wikipedia, list of sharks. Wikipedia. We can see just how old some of these species names are. So, seven-gill shark, 1788. Bluntnose six-gill shark, 1788 as well. Gulper shark, 1788. Kitefin shark, 1788. Bramble shark, 1788. Lantern shark, 1758. So really very near when taxonomy was formally invented. The angular rough shark. These are deep sea species that have been named in the 1700s. Spiny dogfish, the most well-studied shark in the world, 1758. It's kind of funny. Every species has the name of the author, and actually look at that. Squalus acanthius, the spiny dogfish, was actually established by Linnaeus himself. So the father of taxonomy actually, and we can actually find how many sharks Linnaeus named. So Linnaeus named the angel shark, Squatina squatina, the white shark, Carcharodon cicarius, blue shark, Prios glauca, small spotted cat shark, Scilurhinus canicula, the nurse hound, Scilurhinus stellaris, bonnethead shark, Sirena tiburo, and the smooth hammerhead, Sirena zygaena, taupe shark, Galeoridus galeus, the common smoothhound, Musculus musculus, velvet belly lantern shark, Homopterus spinax, angular rough shark, Oxynos centrina, and then we're back at spiny dogfish. So Linnaeus himself, the father of taxonomy, named a handful of shark species, which is so exciting. So, oh, Howard, interesting. The Haida here also had a transformative dogfish spirit. Really, really interesting. Like honestly, sharks and transformation, in a supernatural sense, there's such an interesting overlap as in terms of those themes. So I'm really excited as we learn more about like pre-Columbian cultures and their relationships with sharks, if we see that more of as like a through line. To kind of wrap up some of my understanding as far as North American shark culture, really when the United States became established, there was a great interest in natural history, particularly, I want to say it's the, we talked about it briefly, but I want to say it's the Philadelphia Museum of Science, or it's in Pennsylvania, that some of the earliest institutions, and like the Yale, like Yale Peabody Museum, Harvard Museum collections, like a lot of the universities in sort of like the fledgling United States, they became really interesting centers for natural history, kind of continuing the work of classification, continuing the work of exploration, and discovering and naming new species, and starting to provide catalogs for things. And a lot of early 20th century manuscripts are some of the earliest checklists or catalogs of sharks ever assembled. Harvard Museum of Natural History in particular has multiple... hey Quackers, welcome back. Hope you're doing well and hope you had a good weekend. We're just about to get started with our deep dive into shark culture, so North American shark culture. So I'm on the early 20th century, so the early 1900s, where museums are starting to really kind of ramp up like studies where they're trying to find checklists on, or not find checklists, but make checklists and compile an understanding of like where you could find sharks. Massive shark fisheries were also being established in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and some of them were kind of shockingly extensive. So, famously or infamously, we had a basking shark fishery where in the early part of the 20th century, we had spotter planes looking for basking sharks and directing harpoon boats to find them. Really sadly, and fortunately we don't do that anymore, but that was a really big fishery. Dogfish were a huge fishery. Sharks were fished pretty extensively in the early 20th century, but because of their life history characteristics, their populations started to crash, and we realized that this is not a good resource to harvest because it really is not sustainable based on the life history characteristics of sharks. Just growing slowly, reproducing late, maturing late, and reproducing very few young. So related to that too, I had a point as far as there wasn't, sharks and people didn't really interact as much, where there wasn't a lot of, we had to think about like all these different intersects where we think about like vacations or recreation. That kind of leisure wasn't really until the second half of the 20th century when that was really starting to take off. I mean, there was places already established, and you know the most famous shark attack in North America was the Jersey Shore attacks of 1916, or in the early 1900s in New Jersey, and but there's also kind of like such a there's such a distance from sharks where people didn't really go into the water as much as they do now. And there was such a fascinating array of misunderstandings. I remember there's an article from the 50s where kids were encouraged to ride bull sharks because they seemed quite placid, and they're not, of course. But there was a lot of it's weird. It's like there was an extensive fishery there, and yet as far as like general public, there wasn't a lot of interactions with sharks in the early 20th century. And also in the mid 20th century, we had the beginning of underwater, like popular underwater exploration, like Jacques Cousteau, the beginning of nature documentaries, culminating, and we'll see clips of this, Blue Water, White Death, which is kind of a proof of concept for Steven Spielberg to make a film in which he could get real shark footage, like high quality shark footage, and incorporate it into his own footage, and there you make Jaws. So that's kind of like a really rough overview of. Oh, and actually, before I forget, other things that sharks have been used for, aside from being fished directly for their meat, their liver oils were used for like classic products like lamp lights or lamps, cosmetics, and then their skin was used as sandpaper. And it wasn't until the mid 20th century when we started to create mass-produced like synthetic sandpaper, which is much cheaper to produce, and like a lot of synthetic materials just start to replace shark-derived materials, and it's ultimately better for the sharks, of course, but also it's just like kind of cheaper to make and cheaper to acquire. So a lot of major changes happened in the mid 20th century that I think today it's kind of hard to conceptualize, but when you really look at the history of how our relationships with sharks have changed, it's improved really significantly. And really the problem now, of course, is there's such a huge human population in the world and such a huge demand on fisheries that the fisheries impact and the impact of bycatch on sharks is that's a massive toll on their numbers. But as far as people's perceptions on sharks and our understanding of shark, it's improved dramatically. So that's kind of like my general brief overview. But I think we should hand it over to. We'll go back to this article. We'll hand it over to Noah to have another brief overview of how our how our knowledge of sharks has evolved in general, and then we'll dive into what I'm really, really excited about is Jose Castro's paper on North American shark culture. So, Noah Fisheries had this great article, Memories of Sharks Past. So I'll read through probably all of it, and I'll skim if there's any area that's going to get repetitive. So, let's see. An incisive account of how our knowledge of sharks has grown from Aristotle to the present day wins the Best Paper Award from the Marine Fisheries Review. So, when Europeans first came to the New World, they had no word for shark. Fishermen in medieval Europe kept mostly to rivers, and the few large shark species found near Europe didn't venture into fresh water. Although they were familiar with small sharks, Europeans encountered large sharks for the first time when they arrived in the American tropics. Lacking a name for the creatures, the Spanish borrowed the word tiburon from the Carib Indians. The English ultimately settled on shark from the Mayan zoc. That's actually really interesting. And I'm really shocked by that, actually, that there wasn't really a lot of European shark interactions. I'm honestly very shocked by that because you could find murals of sharks in ancient Rome, and I actually really want to find the etymology of the word shark. So, etymology. So, etymology, the science of, or not the science, but the study of how words originate. I'd be blown away if it's Mayan, and that's so cool if it is, actually. But I wanna check this. So, shark. Here we go. Okay, so shark, large voracious fish by 1560s, perhaps mid-15th century. If an isolated instance in a diary, quote, in Middle English compendium of the same word of uncertain origin. Interesting. Possibly from German Schurk, a variant of shirk, which is scoundrel and villain. On an old theory, the English word is from a Mayan word zoc, or shock, which might have been meant shark. Northern Europeans seem not to have been familiar with the larger sort of sharks before voyages to the tropics began. A slightly earlier name for it in English was tiburon, from Spanish tiburon, which probably is from a native word of South America, such as tupi, or upru, shark. Source also Portuguese tuboro, or Catalan tuaro. So that is actually really cool, and I really love it. It could be German. I love the idea that it's actually Mayan, because like Oh man, that is so cool. Actually, hold on. And that's something I never heard before. So Northern Europeans, and I know the Noah article just said it, but Northern Europeans weren't familiar with the large sharks. And what's kind of when we think about that, um, that's actually extremely fascinating because there are large sharks in Northern Europe, but it would be like basking sharks, and those would be in Ireland and Scotland and Britain. They wouldn't be. I guess they could be in Scandinavia as well, but basket sharks are also harmless, and they act, excuse me, kind of maybe more like whales as far as their benign nature. And what's interesting is that white sharks don't really go to Northern Europe that much, if at all. Actually, Northern Europe is one of the few places that there aren't really white sharks, and they're a cosmopolitan animal. And that's also fascinating because I know Northern Europe has a famous orca population. So in Norway, there's a very famous orca population. And I wonder if the orcas, usually white sharks avoid areas where orcas live. And so I wonder if there's a relationship there where maybe orcas have been in that area for so long that they've kept white sharks out. And so Europeans don't really see them that often. That being said, white sharks do live in the Mediterranean. And it's such a unmistakable animal that you would think that there would be some interactions. But I really still love this theory that once Europeans traveled to the Americas, they maybe encountered these larger sharks more often, and they borrowed the Mayan word "jock" or "shock." I don't know if sometimes X is a little tricky, where it's like it could be "zock" or "chalk," but that's actually I love this theory. I hope this is correct. There's actually it's kind of interesting how there's how to say this. There's certain North American words that seem like they have English origins, but they actually potentially have Aboriginal origins. So Virginia, my home state, is actually one of them. Weirdly enough, so Virginia, we always think it's named after Queen Elizabeth I, who is known as the Virgin Queen, and it probably still is the correct theory in terms of where the word comes from. So the land is named Virginia in her honor. However, there is an older word called Winganda Koa, and you can shorten Winganda Koa to Winganda, which the W's and the V's sometimes can get mixed up, and there's a theory that that's actually the origin of where the term Virginia comes from, is Winganda. So, which is, it's weird because it's like it seems like too much of a stretch, but that was a word that some cultures used to describe this area, and so it's kind of interesting how there might be something similar going on, as far as shark might come from the German Schork, or it could come from the Mayan Jacques. So that's extremely cool, and I never thought about that before. But those quackers, what is that? Shork. So I really do hope it comes from the Mayan word. But I mean, either is fine, of course. But I would be so jazzed if it came from the Mayan word. But let's see. Any other notes? Middle English had houndfish, which probably was used for dogfish and other small sharks. The general Germanic words seem to be represented by Old Norse har, Norwegian high, Danish high, Dutch high, German high, also borrowed in Finnish and Latvian. French requin is literally grimacer, from Norman requin, from Old French rechigner, to bare teeth and grimace. Interesting. An ancient Greek word for shark was carcarius or carcaros, sharp, jagged, or biting. So you can recognize this pretty easily, right? So Carcharodon carcarius or Carcharinus obscurus. So Carcharinus, Carcarius, Carcharodon, they all come from this origin. So it means sharp, jagged, or biting. But the old theory that traces the English word to this has been dropped. Other Greek words for large salacians were itos, bous, lamia, like lamna, narke, skilion was dogfish, like scilia is like the current term for cat shark. Latin used squalus from the root of English whale. Lithuanian riclis is literally swallower. The English word was applied or reapplied to voracious or predatory persons on the image of fish from 1707, originally of pickpockets. like loan shark. Um, so looking and summarizing the meanings of the word shark, you have large, voracious fish, dishonest person who preys on others, artful swindler, scoundrel, villain, to poke, stir. What else we have? Grimacer, to bare the teeth, grimace, sharp, jagged, biting, or dogfish or swallower. So it's really cool that many of the words for sharks they don't have positive connotations. They're very negative. They're about like cheating, consuming, just voraciousness, which is pretty interesting. So I like and the Mayan word. I guess this just literally it just means shark, and it's not necessarily we may not necessarily know a different connotation of it, but overall, really fascinating etymology. And man, that would be so cool if that's actually really like where it came from, like the word shark. But I really love that that Europeans didn't really encounter large sharks, and that does line up with the absence of like large predatory sharks from like or like the maybe the relative uncommonality of large predatory sharks from the Europe and there may be more of them in North America, which is kind of interesting. So they have to incorporate these other terms for these animals. It's pretty interesting. So here is, I believe, a Mayan depiction. Oh, I'm sorry, a Aztec depiction. A detail from a rare pre-Hispanic Aztec manuscript depicts a shark attack on a human. So, right here, this is really interesting. And you would think this is actually really look at this. So you see an ocean wave. You see this incredible animal with these bared fangs. It almost looks like a dragon, but you see the curved fin. So you actually have an upper caudal fin and lower caudal fin very clearly here. You see two dorsal fins. You see pectoral fin and pelvic fin. It looks like perhaps there's another fin here, and it looks like there's a crest here too. And then you see a human leg. So this brings up a really and then you see a human missing a leg here. And bleeding. So this circle is blood effusing from the leg. So this brings a really interesting point into focus as far as tonight's episode of North American Shark Culture before Jaws. There are more shark attacks than we know of. And more lethal interaction sharks than we know of. And a lot of them are undocumented because they're either prehistory like this, or they're just not recorded correctly or just not entered into the database at all. Even so, the amount of shark attacks is still probably extremely low, considering how much time we study the water. But this is really incredible, and like what an astounding moment to think that of all the art that has survived from Aztec culture, we have this piece. So if anything that could be depicted, here is this incredible piece depicting an interaction with sharks. A pre-Columbian interaction with sharks is incredible. So, and then just kind of like zooming back out to see if we could see anything else. So. I see a headdress with what looks like a bird on top of it. An interesting vessel being held here. This could be a boat. It probably is a boat, and this looks like a shell, kind of like almost like a moon snail. But I'm not sure exactly what kind of mollusks live in this area, but Really incredible image. Whatever the name, these animals were much larger and more numerous than the ones we know today. Imagine what it was like back in the 1500s, said Jose Castro, a shark biologist of NOAA Fisheries. The number of sharks in his waters can only be imagined, but it must have been tremendous. Castro has authored several field guides to the sharks in North America and has spent decades studying how fisheries impact sharks' populations. But his latest published research is not a work of scientific inquiry, but of historical scholarship. It recounts how our understanding of sharks has changed from Aristotle to the present day. Explaining his motivation for switching scholarly genres, Castro said that knowledge is very easily lost, even in our age. For his effort at keeping historical knowledge alive, Castro has received a Best Paper Award for the Marine Fisheries Review. The judges were no doubt also impressed by the striking artwork and gripping historical accounts that bring Castro's narrative to life. So, here's one of them. This is a short fin mako shark, described by Mueller and Anlay. So this is the authors of the bull shark. Mueller and Anlay are the two scientists who formally named the bull shark back in the mid 1800s. They were German scientists, but it's really cool to see a piece of their art. Beautiful detail. This is 1838 to 1841, so this is a illustration that's older than the American Civil War, but it's just incredibly accurate. It's actually more accurate than some modern shark art, which is pretty interesting. There's like marine science books that have depictions of mako sharks that are not nearly as accurate as this. Especially the head. I mean, that is straight on a mako shark. They really capture like the large eyes, the conical snout, the large gill slits. So cool. And even got the the caudal keel. So this is a enlarged feature that mackerel sharks have to help cut through the water and kind of helps them build up that huge burst of speed that they need to go after prey. Those accounts are a window into a world now nearly forgotten. Bartolomé de las Casas, a 16th century Spanish priest who lived in Cuba and fought for indigenous rights, penned the first account of a shark attack in the New World. The victim, an Indian slave, was cruelly compelled by his Spanish overseer to dive for pearls in a presence of sharks that have great mouths and could swallow a man on the first gulp. Based on the description of the animal in the Las Casas account, Castro concluded that it was most likely a white shark. Given that the Indians were not equipped to catch large sharks, the largest ones likely grew to great size. Those animals had no enemies, Castro said. This is pretty terrifying. Speaking of white sharks, this looks like one. Let's see. And I'll zoom in so we can see a better look. So this is slightly fanciful, but you could tell this is based on a real dried skeleton. The details are too accurate, but not a dried skeleton, but like a dried shark. There's too many things that are a little bit too accurate. So the relationship between the nostril and the tip of the snout, the distance between the nostril and the eyes. This is a very poorly preserved, if not preserved at all, just like a really decayed shark, but it is a real shark and not like a fanciful drawing. Based on the size of the mouth, the triangular shaped teeth, and how they're pretty much the same shape in both the upper and lower jaw, I'm very confident that this is actually a great white shark. And like what detail too, look at this. You can even see, this is definitely a white shark, because you can even see the teeth are just perfect triangles. They're the same size on each side. That is definitely this is an engraving of a great white, at that time named Lamii piscis, which is like sharkfish. That translates from Latin into like sharkfish, which is kind of interesting. So. Let's see. Based on the description of the animal... so they said it was a white shark. Given the Indians were not equipped to catch large sharks, the largest ones likely grew to a great size. Those animals had no enemies, Castro said. But if 16th century shark populations are scarcely imaginable, imagine those a century ago. Those of a century ago would be no more familiar to us today. The era of industrial exploitation of sharks in North America began in 1717 with the incorporation of the Ocean Leather Company. Shark skins produce a very high quality leather, and the company had vision of processing 1,000 sharks a day, Castro said. Within a few decades, many shark populations were severely overfished, and some had never recovered. Each generation finds a new way to exploit the diminished shark populations they inherit. As Castro recounts, sport fishing for sharks took off after the release of the movie Jaws in 1975. So the rest, I think, is going to be post-Jaws. So we'll kind of save that for next week's episode. So this is going to be after Jaws. But I did want to highlight this illustration. This is a frilled shark from 1923. And it's just beautiful anatomical drawing. Just kind of showing how everything relates. So it's a section of the head is removed, so you can see the optical nerves. You can see some of the musculature. You can see actually the gill arches and the gill filaments. You can see the jaw structure. You can actually even see the teeth here too. And then the olfactory bulb. Just kind of how it all works. And it's an interesting side profile view too, where you can kind of see how everything sits in a shark's head, how packed together the sensory organs are, how large the mouth is in relation to the sensory organs, and then the size of the gills and the amount of musculature is there, the amount of oxygen that is needed in order to kind of power everything. It's a pretty amazing view. So. Excuse me. So I think with that, we'll dive into Castro's actual paper, and it's one of his. I don't know if it's the same one, but it could be because it's a similar theme. And I'm really excited to discuss this more in detail. Here we go. So, and again, Jose Castro, he is, as far as North American sharks go, he is the man. He's contributed so much to the knowledge of these animals. So, historical knowledge of sharks, ancient science, earliest American encounters, and American science, fisheries, and utilization. By Jose Castro. So we'll start with ancient times. We'll probably keep reading this next week too, once we get to 1975. So. In Western civilization, the knowledge of the elazobrink or slacking fishes, sharks and rays, began with Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC. Two of his extant works, the Historia Animalium and the Generation of Animals, both written about 330 BC, demonstrate knowledge of elazobrink fishes acquired by observation. The Historia Animalium is a compilation of observations on animal anatomy, development, and behavior. The Generation of Animals is the first systematic treatise on animal reproduction and embryology. Aristotle used the names of fishes given to them by fishermen. This and the lack of illustrations in his works often make it difficult to ascertain the species involved. Aristotle was the first to point out in the Historia Animalium the main anatomical difference between male and female elazobrinks, which are male claspers. In some Slachia, the male differs from the female, having two appendages hanging down near the residual vent, whereas these are not present in the female. The dogfishes illustrate this. It is a difference found in all such fishes. That's incredible. So Aristotle is like our first on-record shark biologist, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. Oh my goodness. One of my favorite quotes in life, by the way, I'm pretty sure it's attributed to Aristotle, but it's the wisest man is the one who can admit when he's wrong. I think that's a really beautiful quote, and it's something that is really pertinent for all phases of life, and everybody should take to heart. The wisest man is the one who can admit when he's wrong. So, similarly, Aristotle was the first to understand that in many elazobrinks, the embryos are first nourished by yolk stored in the yolk sac, and afterwards by placenta formed between mother and offspring. Slakian vipers, though they bring forth their young alive externally, first of all produce eggs internally. So that's incredible that he actually knew that. In 300 BC, that's really incredible that was known. Wow. The smooth dogfish, the young are produced with the umbilical cord attached to the uterus so that the substance of the egg gets used. The embryo's condition appears to be similar to what that is found in quadrupeds. So Aristotle, BC, is comparing sharks to mammals, essentially, with that placental connection. It's just incredible. So, I should have read this, but let's see. Actually, no. We'll keep going. I was about to read the abstract, but I think we're going to learn a lot of this in the actual paper. So, Aristotle was the first person to write about what we now call nurseries, areas where females give birth to their young and where young find food and safety during their early life. The Salacia come in from the high seas and out of the deep water towards land and produce their young there. This is for the sake of warmth because they are concerned with the safety of their young. Nothing else would be added to knowledge of Osbrick nurseries for over 2,000 years. Oh my goodness. I'm going to kind of skip ahead because there's some notes about Rome and the Dark Ages, but I want to skip ahead to North America. Here is a 16th century engraving of a rough shark, Oxynotus centrina. Actually extremely accurate, which is incredible. Underside. Again, this is 1554, so just like unbelievable how excellent that is. Okay, so we're gonna focus on North America. I'm gonna just kind of read bits and pieces from Europe really quickly. Roman writers' natural history works such as Aelian and Pliny, who followed Aristotle, were compilers of available information. Let's see. The fall of Rome around 476 AD brought a period of economic regression and political chaos. These in turn brought the intellectual thought to a standstill. The Dark Ages had begun, and for the next 1,000 years there was little intellectual advancement. Okay. During the Dark Ages, the available knowledge of animals was contained in works such as Physiologus and the Bestiaries. That's actually really fun. I don't know if anybody plays Final Fantasy, but there was a bestiary in Final Fantasy, so it's kind of wild that we're talking about real ones in shark history. So, the Physiologist was a collection of sample allegorized tales of animals and plants, and was one of the most popular and widely read books of the Dark Ages. It's probably Egyptian in origin, and it was in circulation by 140 AD. Interesting. Alright, so we're going to skip past the Dark Ages because we're focusing again on North American shark culture. So, the rediscovery of sharks in the Renaissance was not limited to scholars, as men of humble education also published descriptions of sharks. One of the earliest descriptions of different sharks were the illustrations by Adrian Conan, the son of fishermen and a wholesaler of fish, who produced one of the oldest manuscripts illustrating whales and fishes. Very cool. Alright. But we'll move forward to sharks of the Western Hemisphere. And I'm going to put this paper in the chat so everybody can read it. At some point, if they want to dive in a little bit deeper, because Castro is an incredible authority. So, sharks in the Western Hemisphere. The first to learn about sharks in North America were the native fishermen who learned how, when, and where to catch them for food or for their oils. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric American Indians utilized sharks widely. Extensive shark remains in Indian middens. So middens are like piles of discarded shells. They're essentially trash piles, but they're actually extremely useful for North American archaeology because they can kind of depict, there's so much that they can tell, but what is the diet of a people in this area. And, you know, where are these middens located? How often, like, what's the age of them? Like, how often are they deposited? Are they seasonal? Do the people who created the middens come, like, stay throughout the entire year, or do they come every like in a seasonal pattern? Was it a good year for sturgeon? Was it a good year for oysters? There's so much that they can actually reveal, which is incredible. But anyway, archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric American Indians utilized sharks widely. Extensive shark remains in Indian middens were in South Florida indicate that sharks were an important food resource in prehistoric America, and that their teeth were used as cutting tools. So in Florida, shark teeth were used as cutting tools for ancient peoples. It's incredible. Based on the dogfish spines found in the middens of the Pacific Northwest, Indians were also catching large numbers of dogfish, but whether they were using them for oil or for skin is uncertain. In any case, much of the early oral knowledge of sharks was lost. Earliest sharks encounters. Since the earliest times, sharks had presented a danger for shipwrecked sailors and for divers who regularly entered the sea. Medieval Europeans were acquainted with small dogfishes that were abundant along the European coast, but there are only nominal mentions of them in the pre-Renaissance literature. In general, Europeans had little contact with large lazarbranchs until after the discovery of the New World by the Spanish, so it is natural for the first accounts of large lazarbranchs came from Spanish authors. So I want to make a note of this, by the way, because the parlance has changed since the 90s and the 2000s. So I'm not sure when this article was written, but I just want to say New World is not a great term, because it is a Eurocentric term, because it's like a common what do you call it? Like a common. Because I just kind of throughout my own life, living in Virginia, I've had friends of different tribes, and Virginia still has actually quite a few tribes who are the descendants of many different peoples, but Algonquin peoples, Monacan peoples, and like the New World it's a European term, and the question comes back to like new for who. So it was always there for the people who were not European. So I just want to kind of make a note that it's not. It sounds romantic and everything, but it's not a great term to use. So just want to share that because it's like, our culture has changed, where I think there's more sensitivity to that and more understanding of that and respect for that, which I appreciate now. So, but yeah, I mean, like by the time this article was written, it probably was not, considered as much. So, speaking of New World. Where some of this kind of came from is actually a fantastic movie called The New World, which is very prominently features what do you call it? I'm trying to think of the right word, but features respectfully actors from different tribes to portray Powhatan people, and that was something like behind the scenes that they took issue with, where the title of the movie is called New World, but they we're discussing how that's actually not the greatest term to use. So, just in respect of their culture. But anyway, just a little sidebar. Wanted to make a note of. The Spanish were familiar with small dogfish sharks, which they called cazones or cazons. Sorry, cazons. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the early Spanish explorers first encountered large and voracious sharks of the Caribbean, and in those days, with no fisheries preventing the sharks from reaching their allotted age and size, there must have been comparatively incredible numbers of large sharks. The Spaniards quickly distinguished the large sharks from the smaller cazones, with which they, were familiar, and lacking a name for them, they borrowed the Indian name tiburones, or singular tiburon. So tiburon is still the classic Spanish name for sharks, which is pretty interesting. Here's the same white shark engraving. This is from 1668 by an artist named Steno. So, and what's really cool is like the caption here confirms it's a white shark. So I could tell based on the anatomy of it, but it's kind of nice to see that confirmed. This is truly a white shark. So really incredible engraving. you might have seen this before. If anybody, because I've seen this in like some older shark books, but let me know anybody in the chat if you've seen this before. It's pretty famous older shark engraving. Beautiful, actually, really beautiful illustration of the teeth. Look at this. The artist actually captured the serrations. So white sharks famously have serrated teeth, which is not really super common in the shark world. Most sharks have kind of smooth teeth. Serrated edges is something that's typically reserved for the larger sharks who handle large prey like seals. But it's really cool that this artist actually captured the serrations of a white shark's tooth pretty effectively here. So. Okay. Early natural history. Here we go. Although the knowledge that the Indian tribes of the Americas had about sharks has been lost, there's evidence that some tribes were aware that sharks could be dangerous to humans. In one of the few surviving Mexican codices, the Codex Thiervare Mayer, there's a stylized figure of what is clearly a shark. It shows an elongated fish-like creature with a mouthful of large triangular teeth with a right number of fins for a shark, a heterocircle tail, and a human foot protruding from its mouth. It is probably a bull shark, Carcharodon lucus, or a tiger shark, Gallicera cuvier. The creature is labeled Acipactli and translates as a swordfish. This is obviously a translation error, as the creature is certainly shark-like and lacks the identifying rostrum and homocircle tail of the swordfish, and swordfish also lack large triangular teeth depicted in the illustration. So I think when they are talking about the illustration, I think they're talking about this one actually, right here, with the triangular teeth and the human foot in the mouth. So it's pretty incredible. The first natural history of the New World was Sumario de la Natural Historia de las Indias, written by Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo and published in Toledo, Spain in February 1526. In this work, Oviedo mentions a great diversity and number of fishes in the New World, but he discusses only three: Tortuga, which is a turtle, Tiburon, shark, and manatee. Oh, manatee. Yeah, that's really cool. He writes, El segundo pescado de los tres que desuso de dijo se llama tiburón. Este es grande pescado y muy suelto en el agua y muy cocinero. Sorry. The second fish of the three mentioned above is called a tiburon. This is a great fish, very quick in the water, very much a carnivore. De Oviedo's explanation of what the animal was called indicated the reader was not expected to be familiar with the fish or the name. Ooh, that's actually really interesting. Let me read that again. De Oviedo's explanation of what the animal was called indicated that the reader was not expected to be familiar with the fish or the name. So that's actually really cool detective work that... because this is such an unfamiliar animal, we need an explanation for European audiences, which is terrifying. That's actually really incredible. Oh my goodness. And again, I can't help but think that, because white sharks are in the Mediterranean. They are in the Mediterranean. But I can't help but think that the orca population in the in Northern Europe may have had a really big part in preventing exposure for Europeans to white sharks, large sharks like the white shark, because they should otherwise be there. There is a seal population in that area. The water temperature is not an issue for them, so ecologically they should be there. But I wager it's the orcas that have probably kind of prevented them from really, truly getting a foothold and then having a large presence. So it's kind of interesting. But Bartolomé de las Casas was one of the early Spanish settlers in the New World, arriving in Cuba in 1502. Around 1513, he became an ordained priest, presumably the first to be ordained in the Americas. At the time, he had become a Dominican friar and the defender of the Indians, writing extensively about the abuses and atrocities committed on them. Returning to Spain in 1547, Las Casas joined the monastery of San Gregorio in Valladolid in 1551. In 1559, Las Casas willed the manuscript of his great work, Historia de las Indias, to the monastery, with the prohibition of publishing his work until 40 years after his death. His accounts of the atrocities committed by the Spaniards on the Indians were considered so damaging they were not published for 350 years. Oh my gosh. So, kind of side note, when I lived in Florida, briefly. Also quackers, yes. Side note on this beautiful drawing, again of a rough shark. This is from 1585, which is unbelievable. It's still fairly accurate, really. Rough sharks are squashy like this, and they have the two elongated dorsal fins, where the spine is at the midpoint of the dorsal fin. They have the prickly body, no anal fin, but a pectoral and pelvic fin that are kind of paddle-shaped. So this is actually a very accurate drawing, especially from the 16th century. It's really incredible that, and such a privilege that we are able to see it. It's so cool. But it's interesting that this article, or this kind of segment of the article, was reminding me of in the United States, Florida, and on the East Coast of the United States, Florida and because I lived in Virginia, lived in Florida briefly, and then moved back to Virginia. I mean, it's my home state, and I just, I miss the change of seasons, and like I had such a connection with the wildlife here that, I mean, it's my home. But it was so interesting comparing the two, where there's such a different history. Where Virginia famously it's English based, where it's you have Jamestown, which is the first permanent English settlement in North America. You have Yorktown, which is where the British General Cornwallis was captured, and the United States gained its independence, or won its independence. So it's Virginia's layered in English history, and there's sort of I mean there's, and it's interesting where English history in North America begins in the 1600s and slowly builds up. Spanish history in North America begins in the 1500s, so it is essentially almost a century before English history. So the depth is very interesting, and it's not the first time I've learned about. I mean, every culture. Every culture committed atrocities in North America, but there's some places in Florida, like DeSoto's, I think it's DeSoto National Park, but DeSoto was an explorer, a Spanish explorer of Florida, and like he did some horrible stuff. But it just kind of reminded me that like Florida's history is just very different, where just much older, much more exploration, which is really interesting. And actually some Spanish explorers were in Virginia briefly. They actually went to the James River and were driven out by the tribes at the time. And actually I think they explored other parts of the Chesapeake Bay, but were driven out by the tribes at the time. So I'm kind of rambling, but it's really just interesting comparing. North America has so many different, as far as European history, French history, Spanish history, English history, and Florida and Virginia, Spanish and English history is just very different. So in a separate publication, Las Casas wrote that one of the earliest descriptions of sharks in the New World in his Apologetica Historia Summaria, begun in 1527. Las Casas wrote, I'm not going to read this in Spanish again, I'll just translate this. There are in the Sea of Hispaniola some fishes that also enter the rivers, built like cazones, or at least their whole body, the head blunt, and the mouth in the center line of the belly with many teeth that the Indians called tiburones. So this is a bull shark. It's so cool to read something centuries old, but you can immediately tell what species it is. And the fact that it's an animal that is large, it is dangerous, and it can enter into rivers in this part of the world, it is absolutely a bull shark. With a blunt, and it says it has a blunt head too, so it's truly a bull shark trait. Las Casas also penned in his Historia the first report of a shark attack on humans in the New World. Most of the Spaniards that came to the New World expected to become very rich in a short time. Besides searching for gold and spices, many also searched for pearls. Because many of the Indians were great divers, the Spanish compelled their Indian slaves to dive for pearls, which is really horrible. Here's that same illustration of the mako shark. So it looks like the note article we read is a brief summary of Castro's article. But there's some additional illustrations like this one. So this is actually really cool. This is very similar to the first illustration we saw, but a couple key differences. So let me go back to the first illustration we saw. This animal looks kind of more like a crocodile, and this is actually really interesting. I just noticed this. Look at these bands. They almost kind of look like they almost kind of remind me of tiger stripes, and it makes me think of I wonder if this was a tiger shark. This illustration is the same pattern, so these triangular shaped bands. It's the same kind of pointed fins, it's same heterocercal tail. The mouth is a bit different, where still triangular large teeth, still the head crest. The eyes are quite a bit different. This is so cool. Here the mouth seems a lot more compact and kind of retained. But here the mouth looks a bit more extended. So I wonder if this early illustration actually might be of a shark protruding its jaws. Like, we know that shark jaws are not fused to their cranium. So in a weird way, this actually could be a depiction of a shark protruding, lunging its jaws forward as it's engulfing this poor human foot. Whereas this might be the jaws kind of more retracted. So not sure, but again, incredible to see these illustrations. In the third volume of his Historia de las Indias, Las Casas wrote, they take the Indians in their canoes, which are their small boats, and a Spanish executioner, Verdugo, goes with them to direct them, arriving in deep water 3 or 4 fathoms deep. He orders them to enter the water, they dive and go all the way to the bottom, and there they take the oyster that carry the pearls, and they fill some small nets, and they carry around their necks. He continued, commonly there are 2 species of beast, and even 3 being very cruel that eat men, and even horses they could tear into pieces. One species is tiburones, and the second is mararajos, probably the white shark. The third is crocodiles called lagartos, and by those that do not know the ignorant. The tiburones and lagartos, which have admirable teeth, seize a man or horse by the leg. Yeah, absolutely, Howard. Just want to agree. It's incredible that we can see this work of art. This is truly incredible. The tiburones and lagartos, which have admirable teeth, seize a man or a horse by the leg or by the arm or any other part, and taking him deep, they kill them there and eat him on their own time. The marajos are very much larger and have great mouths, and they could swallow a man on the first gulp. On one occasion, it happened that an Indian, upon diving, saw a marajo close to him and came up fleeing up out of the water onto the canoe. The Spanish executioner argued with him, asking why he came up so quickly without bringing anything. The Indian said that there was a great fish and that I feared it would kill him. The Spanish forced him to return to diving to make sure beat the Indian with a stick. The sad Indian dove with the marajo that was waiting for him, charged him, and swallowed him. Oh my god, this is so horrible to read, actually. Because it's just like, this is just really horrible. It seems that at the beginning the Indian fought with the fish, and there was a swirl in the water for a while. The Spaniard understood that the fish had attacked the Indian, and seeing the Indian was not returning, he killed a small dog that they had in the boat and put on a hook with a heavy chain, which they commonly carry for these fishes, and threw it in the water. And later the marajo took it, the baited hook, for it was not satisfied, and the hook set in such a way that it could not escape. The Spaniard, feeling that the fish was hooked, gave it enough line and slowly returned towards the beach in his canoe or boat. Jumping to land, he called for people to help him, and he landed the beast, giving blows and axes and rocks or whatever they had, and killed it, opening its belly, and found the unfortunate Indian who took him out. The Indian gave 2 or 3 gasps, and he died there. So that, wow, Jesus, well, the Marajo is probably the white shark. The name is applied today to the mako shark, genus Isurus, in many Spanish-speaking countries. Both the white shark and mako are landloid sharks with pointed noses and powerful caudal keels on the caudal peduncle that can be easily confused in the water. At the time when Las Casas and Oviedo were writing, Caribbean monk... Oh, wow. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having a moment. Like, oh, wow. Sorry, like, my brain just kind of exploded. At the time when Las Casas and Oviedo were writing, Caribbean monk seals, Monachus tropicalis, were abundant in the West Indies. Oh, man. Oh, this is so sad. So, okay. So, Caribbean monk seals are extinct. I'm pretty sure that is an extinct species, but my brain just kind of exploded is that I forgot that they used to live there. And that is a draw for white sharks. So white sharks do live in the Caribbean, but they're not really super populous there. They're more focused in cold water areas like South Africa, New England, California. But and part of that is that white sharks are like a massive locomotive in the sense that they are able to raise their body temperature higher than the water around them, but they need to keep up that metabolism, and in order to do that, they need to keep feeding. And in order to do, like the best way for them to do that is they need this energy-rich prey, and seals are just really good for them to kind of fuel that like constant engine that is keeping their body temperature warm, warmer than the surrounding water. So it's kind of incredible to read about monk seals, which I completely forgot used to live in the Caribbean, and that they must have been a food supply for white sharks, and that's part of why white sharks could be reliably seen in the area. That's unbelievable to think about. It's just like everything is related, everything connects, and I just did not even think about that. Where with the removal of monk seals, you actually removed, not removed, but reduced the white shark population. Let's look at this really quickly. Caribbean monk seal. I'm pretty sure this is gone. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's an extinct species of seal. So, I wonder if we can get... Yeah, let's see. I wonder if we can get the IUCN Red List monk seal. I don't know if we can. Man, I totally forgot about that. There's a Mediterranean monk seal that's still alive, but yeah, I might have to cheat with Wikipedia. Yeah, I guess I'll cheat with Wikipedia. Okay, hold on. Wow, this is like really blowing my mind. Caribbean monk seal. Okay, the Caribbean monk seal, also known as the West Indian seal or sea wolf, is an extinct species of seal native to the Caribbean. The main natural predators of Caribbean monk seal were large sharks such as the great white and tiger sharks, and possibly transient orcas, though killer whales are not often sighted in the Caribbean. However, humans would become their most lethal enemy. Overhunting the monk seals for oil and meat, as well as overfishing for the natural prey, are the likely reasons for the seal's extinction. The last confirmed sighting of a Caribbean monk seal was in 1952 at Serenilla Bank, in the waters west of Jamaica and off the eastern coast of Nicaragua. In 2008, the species was officially declared extinct by the United States after an exhaustive 5-year search. This analysis was conducted by the National Marine Fisheries Service and National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. The Caribbean monk seal is closely related to the endangered Hawaiian monk seal, a species which is restricted to the Central Pacific surrounding the Hawaiian Islands, and the Mediterranean monk seal, a vulnerable species predominantly found in the waters off Greece. So here's a picture of a monk seal from an aquarium. A description of the monk seal. This is really... I cannot believe I forgot about this animal. And it just makes sense that... White sharks live in the Caribbean, but they're not as populous because the this prey item is not there anymore. It's incredible. For comparison, here's the Hawaiian monk seal. So just as a similar looking animal. It's kind of amazing when you think of seals. You think of like that's a cute picture. You think of temperate animals. You don't really typically think of tropical animals. So. That was a great picture of a seal of a sea turtle. So, oh man. All right, we'll keep reading. This has been pretty heavy so far. So let's see. So we were at the time Las Casas and Oviedo were writing, Caribbean monk seals were abundant in the West Indies. Oviedo wrote that there are many seals and they are very large in the seas of these Indies, as well as among such islands, and also on the coast of the mainland. I believe that white sharks frequented those waters just as they frequent waters around seal and sea lion rookeries elsewhere today, whereas mako sharks are oceanic species that do not enter shallow waters. Oviedo describes them in this way. I'm going to skip to the English translation. The morajo is a larger animal than the tiburon and fiercer, but not as swift nor ready to pounce. That is an interesting note. They somewhat resemble sharks as they are both scaleless animals, but as I said, they are bigger. So, okay, the reason why this is interesting is they're talking about a great white shark, saying it's not ready, it's not swift or ready to pounce, and this actually feeds it or correlates with the observation that white sharks are a bit cautious with their prey items. They investigate first before attacking, and this actually kind of fits with that. The fact that they're not as swift or ready to pounce. Mako sharks are fast ambush predators that need to like rocket towards their prey item. But white sharks do that too, but white sharks typically circle their prey, make observations, do test bites. They're a little bit more tactical, which is pretty interesting. So, and it's interesting that there's a note of that here, basically. So, of these, I've seen some with 9 rows of teeth, one behind the other in a circular mouth. They are found in the seas off Spain, according to what the seamen say. The Caribbean monk seal was subject to an indiscriminate slaughter for over 300 years and was so scarce by the 1880s that Allen referred to it as an almost mythical species. It has been considered extinct since the 1950s. As the abundant seals were killed off, the white sharks ceased to visit the shallow coastal waters of the West Indies. The name Morajo endured on its similar cousins, the mako sharks. This is so amazing. So mako sharks borrowed the name that was once attributed to white sharks because white sharks left the area. That's really wild. Wow. This is an incredible article. Shark attacks on pearl divers continued throughout the Spanish Americas during the colonial period. Once the Indian divers and their entire tribes had been obliterated through disease, famine, and the Spanish cruelties, they were replaced by black slaves. Antonio de Ulloa, the governor of Louisiana and Florida, geographer and member of La Condamine expedition to Ecuador, traveled extensively through the Spanish Americas in the 1700s. In 1748, de Olona wrote Viaje a la America Meridional, an extensive description of the places and peoples he visited. He described the pearl fishery in many islands of the archipelago de las Perlas, such as Isla del Rey and Taboga. Sharks are greatly feared by the pearl divers. Sharks and temporeras, female sharks, tiger sharks, of monstrous size, proper meals of the bodies of fishermen. Wow. So I said that many shark attacks have not been documented, and this is proving that point far more than really realize. Wow. Or far more than I could imagine. Boats carrying 18 to 20 black divers, a foreman, more or fewer depending on the size of the boat. And the number of the team travel far from shore to places they recognize as oyster grouts and where the water depths does not exceed 10 to 15 fathoms deep. Yeah, I'm going to kind of skip ahead because this is probably going to be lurid as well. Um, oh, this is interesting. Um, yeah, okay. This is just similar to the first story, just really vicious shark attacks. Interesting, the Manta biorostris, which was also much dreaded by the pearl divers. Why did such a filter-feeding gentle giant acquire such a reputation? Um, According to De Ulloa, the mantas squeezed the fishermen, enveloping them with their bodies or putting them out their weight against them on the bottom. It seems that not without reason the name manta, blanket, was given to these fishes from its shape and properties, the shape being extensive and big as a blanket. It is the same purpose of enveloping the man or other animal that catches, squeezing it in such manner that it makes the victim exhale its last breath by being compressed. The form of this fish is similar to a ray except for being incomparably larger. So this is... I'm learning so much from this. This is fascinating to me because I've heard of this reputation that mantas are feared, but it never made sense because they were plankton feeders. Mantas are well known to tangle with mooring lines or boat anchor lines, so dragging buoys or small boats for long distances. It is likely that one of these behemoths swimming through the multiple lines dangling from a pearl fishing boat could catch on one of the line's encephalic appendages, and so pull the unfortunate diver against its ventral side, giving the appearance of enveloping the diver and dragging them to the depths, and possibly forcing the crew to sever the line. Conversely, the tangled manta could follow the path of least resistance along the rope and end at the bottom, pressing the diver in the manner described by De Ulloa. This is probably how the manta, plankton-feeding and gentle, acquired its earlier names of devil ray or sea devil and a sinister reputation. Whew. Wow. So there's a pretty frightening history. I was truly not expecting this because I was familiar with trading in shark teeth. I was familiar with sharks being revered and having a spiritual connection to tribes in North America. But as we are getting into Central America, South America, a lot of really horrifying history actually, which is incredible. It's really remarkable to read. So, the curious naturalists. The European colonization of the America brought the early naturalists, for example, Bannister, Barnum, Wilson, Audubon. These men studied the land, animals, and plants, but they had little interest in sea animals, which were difficult to study. Sea animals were studied when they were exploited and became economically important, and the knowledge of sharks followed this trend. Curious naturalists would not study sharks until the early 20th century, about the same time when the sharks started to be exploited. So to understand how knowledge of sharks was acquired in North America, one must follow the development of natural history as well as the industries that exploited sharks. When faunistic works on fishes started to appear in the 1800s, naturalists just enumerated the species of sharks that they could discern, if any, that they had obtained from the literature, sometimes adding a few assorted facts. One of the earliest works on fishes in North America is Smith's Natural History. Howard, yes, I've never heard of such aggressive behavior on the part of mantas in modern times. I completely agree with that. I have not either, and I think, unfortunately, it sounds like it's a freak accident that happened in the past, and that sort of created that reputation. I will say also, when you look at a manta from the top down, it's a big black animal with the cephalic lobes that look like horns. So it almost kind of looks like Batman silhouette. So it's kind of like a fearsome looking silhouette from the top, and it's a massive animal. So it might be part of kind of an initial shock and concern, and then maybe a freak accident, and then the mythology thus was established. But I agree. Mantas. I mean, there's plenty of examples of divers and snorkelers being able to interact with mantas completely safely. So the only danger would be because they're so large. Just if manta somehow were to ram you or bump into you in a certain way, it might be hurtful. Similar like a basking shark. If a basking shark slapped you with its tail, not even on purpose, it still would draw blood because of the dermal denticles and the size and the power of the animal. So, but yeah, I completely agree that mantas aren't aggressive, and there's never been a modern incident really. So, let's see. Curious naturalists not study sharks in the early 20th century, but at the same time when sharks started to be exploited. So to understand how the knowledge of I was over here. One of the earliest works on fishes in North America is Smith's Natural History of the Fishes of Massachusetts in 1833, which included 8 species of sharks and 4 rays, most of which can clearly be identified. The dusky smoothhound or smooth dogfish, the spiny dogfish, the white shark, the blue shark, the common thresher, a hammerhead of some kind, so that could be the smooth or scalloped hammerhead, and the basking shark. Smith's accounts are generally short and fanciful, except for that of the white shark, which repeats the dreadful accounts of its voracity and attacks on humans so common to the white shark literature. Decay, 1842, gave more comprehensive taxonomic descriptions of 13 sharks in his book on the fauna of New York, but there was little else in the descriptions. Storer, in 1845, in his synopsis of fishes in North America, included 14 species in his Squalidae, which include the genus Pristis. That's extremely exciting that there's this would be a sawfish. Pristis is a sawfish, but he gave but a brief description of the shark, stating with most... Oh, wow, look at this. So this is from 1842 from Decay. So this is a dusky smoothhound, Muscus canis. So it definitely is an emaciated, dried out specimen, but it still is actually pretty accurate. So you have the 2 large dorsal fins, almost equal in size. The fin placement is actually pretty spot on. You have the pelvic fin directly behind the free rear tip of the first dorsal fin, a weakly developed caudal fin, the beautiful ovate eyes, and then actually this bottom illustration shows like the pavement-like teeth. So this is actually an extremely accurate illustration from 1842. So well done. Like I love ancient shark art that is just like accurate. Like shark art that is just by the expertise of the artist that they're able to accurately capture this kind of image. It's so cool. Brief description of sharks, stating with most of the species found in the waters of Massachusetts, my acquaintance is but slight. Many of them I have had no opportunities of examining. The Civil War, so the American Civil War, and the hard economic times that followed prevented any further works on American sharks until early in the next century. At the beginning of the 20th century, most ichthyologists had little interest in sharks. Ichthyologists were trained to identify fishes and usually cared little about their biology except for a few species of commercial importance. And ichthyologists identify fishes using meristic traits such as a scale or spine counts, skeletal bone structures, etc. Sharks do not have commercial importance and none of the morphological characteristics that ichthyologists liked to use for identification. So ichthyologists generally ignored sharks, which is so funny. Excuse me, that cracks me up because today the opposite is true, where if you go into marine science, people roll their eyes if you want. I shouldn't say they roll their eyes, but many people want to study sharks and whales. Those are they're charismatic megafauna. They're the 2 fields that many people really would love to study. And it's really funny that it's usually kind of like a harder sell to study fish, like bony fish, because they're just not as like charismatic as sharks or whales. or sea turtles. Sorry, sharks, whales, sea turtles. Those are the big ones that many people really like to study. But the opposite is it's so funny that the opposite is true that ichthyologists prefer to study just fish. And they're like, sharks, who cares? I was like, wow, that's such a reversal of, of what it is today. So many people want to be with sharks. So many people want to study sharks. So, I mean, it's great that the culture has turned around that much. But David Starr Jordan, in 1907, the Dean of American Ichthyologists, covered the entire Elasmobranchs in 37 of the 789 pages of his comprehensive popular work, Fishes. In a prefatory note to the second edition of his book, Jordan in 1925 wrote, "The writer has tried to compress all that an educated man is likely to know or care to know about fishes. The implication was clear: ichthyologists, ergo people, had little interest in sharks." Yep, dolphins too, 100%. Yeah, dolphins are so popular. People, oh my gosh. Yep. Despite the ichthyologist's general lack of interest in sharks, in the early 20th century, a few works on sharks were published that have not been surpassed in usefulness and beauty. The first of these works was the Normal Plates of the Development of Squalus acanthius by R.E. Scammon of the Harvard Medical School. Scammon... Cheese and Quackers is kind of hilarious. It reminds me of Hank Green's video about how we classify animals. He made a point of how labeling sharks as fish doesn't show how vastly different sharks are from fishes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Quackers. So my wife showed me that video, actually, which I really appreciate. Because it's weird that there's still... we're not still, but like it's weird that classically sharks... lampreys, hagfish, sharks, rays, chimeras, skates, and all the bony fishes, they're all lumped into the category of fishes. It is honestly really weird when you think about it, because they all have evolved so, oh, thank you, we love Mrs. Jaws, thank you. They've all evolved so differently. It's almost like an equivalent would be, I'm trying to think, like a great example would be lumping birds, mammals, and reptiles into the category reptiles. And it's like, yes, technically they are reptiles. Technically, like evolutionarily they are reptiles, but that's such a dumb way to like look at it, because obviously birds and mammals are so different, like as far as like life history, they're so different. So it's just like, it's the same. It's like I appreciate that Hank Green video. So, and I appreciate the sharks are appropriately given their own special category. And I argue that against the rays all the time, because it's like, sharks are their own amazing thing, and rays are also amazing, but they're not sharks. I do not like it when scientists say rays are flat sharks. Like, no, they're rays. They're different. They're different. They're different. They've taken a different road. So, let's see. Scammon illustrated the entire development of the spiny dogfish with excellent drawings of both whole embryos and cross and sagittal sections. It remains today as the most complete reference to the normal development stages of sharks. This work was part of a German series on the embryonic development of animals. So I'm going to put a pin here because I want to... Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. So, I want to see... I thought there was... I'm kind of jumping ahead. I really thought there... Oh, there... Okay, so this is not it, but this is embryonic development of a horn shark. So, we'll go ahead and read this. So, or just kind of see this as a comparison. So... Quackers people say that, yes. So, and I think it's died down, but in the mid 2010s, I caught on to like a group of scientists who were trying to argue that rays are hypermodified flat sharks, and it's like, and like they are. I mean, they are kind of, sort of, technically. I mean, evolutionarily they are, but again, it's the same for me. It's kind of the same thing as saying that a bird is a hyper modified dinosaur. It's like yes, it is, but it's kind of dumb. It's like that's that's not the point. And there was this weird move. It's all about semantics, really, because it's like it's not a big deal. But I thought there's this weird little movement of when you make a shark book or a shark article, you have to include the rays as a shark. And it's like no, and there's a swath of scientists who are like no, you keep them separate. They're different. They're different. The rays are the rays. The sharks are the sharks. Like the rays are not pancake sharks. They're just rays. They're their own thing. It's semantics. So I fall on the side of just keeping them like they're clearly related. Rays clearly evolved from sharks, but I like keeping them in their own category. They're just a little bit different. They're just different. And that's okay. It's just that they're their own thing. So, but some people just call rays flat sharks, and I'm like, nah, I don't like that personally. But anyway, yes, Howard, all of that ignorance set the stage for Jaws to trigger society. Actually, I'm going to start this, Howard, because this is a fantastic comment. All of that ignorance set the stage for Jaws to trigger society's fear of the unknown. Yes, yes, absolutely. And like it's like the white shark truly is a fearsome animal, but it is also a nuanced animal. It's not this like aggro murderous thing that's just waiting to get you. We've learned that they're very careful in terms of how they hunt. They're very cautious in terms of how they interact with new or unfamiliar objects, and they're an animal that deserves a lot of respect, and they don't need to be villainized. I mean, they're just as and we offer that respect to like tigers and lions, which are incredibly dangerous animals, but they also captivate a sense of beauty. Like a lot of people love tigers and like love lions, and they there's that reverence for them and that respect for them, and white sharks deserve the same. As far as like it is dangerous. It is an animal that you don't underestimate, but with understanding you have respect. But to your point, Howard, you're absolutely right that because there was like such a lack of understanding when Jaws came out, it just terrified people and just triggered like this primal response of just fear. Like, oh, here's this like horrible, terrifying thing that's out to get me. In a weird way, you can apply. There's a lot of like animal disaster movies that were very popular in the '70s, but actually continued into the '90s. So, Orca. I think it's called Orca or Blackfish. I forget what it is, but there was one about orca whales that villainized orca whales as these like murderous animals because they were trying to rip off Jaws. Komodo, which is one about Komodo dragons. Anaconda is probably the most famous one. Jaws and Anaconda are probably the two most famous ones. I gotta watch Anaconda again. I have not seen that in forever, but it's like movie villainizes animal and makes it a active human hunting villain. But the more you understand these animals, the more ridiculous it gets. Probably the most ridiculous is snakehead. So there was this kind of genre of movie about snakeheads, which are this invasive fish species that look pretty ugly, but they're very small and they can't really they cannot kill you like unless. Oh yeah, my brother flat out refused to swim in the ocean the year Jaws came out. Most people did. I mean, most people truly did. I mean, because it is a. I will say, as far as the craft of filmmaking, it is an excellent movie. It is very well done, and it is very effective in building tension, inducing that fear. It effectively strikes that fear into you. And that also, I think it's something about. I did a couple videos on Jaws on this channel, and I think one point that I like to touch on is that it taps into a little bit of thalassophobia and a little bit of the fear that we have of sharks in general, which is it ultimately is the fear of the unknown, where the ocean is a disorienting, unfamiliar environment to people. You're not at your best capacity in the ocean, especially at night, of course. But like anywhere, like you're not at your best capacity. You can't smell, you can't breathe, you can barely hear anything. Your only sense is sight. Everything else is gone, basically, if you're underwater. And it's also a very spatially disorienting environment where if you're underwater, it's very easy to get lost. And also, it's extremely difficult to predict what's around you. And I think there is a true. It's similar to being afraid of the dark, where like if you're in a dark room in a dark environment, it's very easy to fill that space with like monsters. It's very easy to fill that space with a lurking terror that you don't know what direction it's going to come out of. And Jaws, I think, is an extremely well-crafted example of that, or well-crafted form of that kind of fear, where you cannot predict where the shark is going to be. You're in an unfamiliar space that you don't know anything about. You don't know the rules of this space. And I think there's a very primal fear that comes out of that. And when you have that and take that with the ignorance that we're clearly seeing in the history of sharks before Jaws, and really like the science starts to kind of get there. Oh my gosh, when the head rolled out of the side of the boat, almost everyone in the theater was gassed. There was a couple screams too. Oh my gosh, that scene. Actually, my wife and I watched Jaws. I want to say it was a couple months ago, but she actually jumped at that scene too. So, because she's never seen it before. So we watched it for the first time together. I want to say it was actually a couple months ago. But I was shocked that she was actually okay with the head in the boat scene, but the shark was the shark's head out of the water is when she jumped as well. So, anyway, like it is interesting. Tying it all the way back to your comment, which I think is brilliant, Howard, is if Jaws came at a point when there was more information and a better understanding, it probably would not have had as big of an impact as it did. But unfortunately, it came at a point when we just really didn't know sharks well, and we're unfamiliar with them. And now that the movie came out, it was like, oh my gosh, all the water is dangerous. All the water has white sharks. All the water is unsafe, and it just created this mass hysteria that is out of place. So yeah. Wanted to touch on this illustration before we get back to, because I think speaking of Jaws, we're gonna arrive at the point right before it. But this is a great early illustration of embryonic development for horn sharks. So you have the A case here, and inside the A case is this first stage of the embryo. You can see where the embryo is in the A case. And really beautiful. The corkscrew shape helps lodge the embryo safely into a rock crevice. This figure here on the left is the embryo developing. This figure here is, you can start to see distinctive shark-like characteristics. So the caudal fin, the two tiny dorsal fins, the gills completely exposed, and then the yolk sac being nourishment for the animal. Then eventually you get to this phase where you have coloration, pigmentation. You still have a yolk sac. You have the rest of these features developing, but you have mostly a nearly fully formed shark, and then finally you have this horn shark, so this Japanese horn shark hatching, and being fully formed when it hatches. So, but I'll go back to where we were. I think we were on here. The first American treatise dedicated to lazarings, the Plagiostomia, which I've read parts of actually, was done by Samuel Garman of the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard College. This work covered all the species then known from throughout the world. The work is strictly taxonomic, but the illustrations of sharks, rays, and anatomical details are splendid. So, figure 10, I think this is from the Plagiostoma. Yep. So here is another view of a smooth hound. So similar to the first illustration that we saw. And then a truly fantastic illustration of a white shark. So here is, speaking of Jaws, a very accurate white shark illustration. You can actually see white sharks do have this like black spot in the axle of their pectoral fin. So it's actually really cool to see that there. You have the caudal peduncle here, the caudal keel, and you can actually see a little indent at the caudal peduncle. Very tiny dorsal and anal fin, second dorsal and anal fin, very large first dorsal fin. Pretty sharp demarcation of the white belly from the dark back. So, really, really good white shark illustration. Let's see. There's almost no biological information about species because such was the lack of knowledge of natural history at this time. The only attempt to understand the behavior of sharks in the early 20th century was by G.H. Parker in 1914, who carried out a series of experiments to understand how dogfish use their sense of smell. In the following decades, sharks would acquire increasing economic importance, and our knowledge about them would expand dramatically, although the birth of shark biology, and not just shark taxonomy, was still decades away. I'm just going to briefly touch on, because I know we have about 20 minutes left. This has been really fantastic, but I'll just kind of touch on a couple notes here. The most significant works on sharks in the early 20th century resulted from the work of Bashford Dean, a scholar with diverse interests ranging from the archaic fishes to medieval body armor. He is a professor of vertebrate zoology at Columbia University, curator of recent and fossil fishes in the American Museum of Natural History, and an expert and collector of medieval armor. At a time when ichthyologists were simply trained to identify fishes, often ignoring everything else about them while becoming obsessed with trivia of the nomenclature, Bashford Dean studied the embryology, anatomy, and paleontology of fishes and never lost an opportunity to watch the behavior, spawning, or nesting of fishes. In 1895, at the age of 28, after some 5 years of working in ichthyology, he published his notable textbook, Fishes Living and Fossil, a unique work that synthesized embryology, comparative anatomy, and paleontology of fishes. Let's see. The discovery of the frilled shark in 1884 caught Dean's attention. In the early 1900s, he traveled to Japan to secure 39 specimens. Eugene Willis Gudger was the first American ichthyologist who could be considered the true natural biologist and the first to study the biology of elasmobranchs. Gudger, who received his PhD degree from Johns Hopkins University in 1905. That's actually really cool because Johns Hopkins is in Baltimore, and this university publishes. It has Johns Hopkins Press, which publishes fishes of the Chesapeake Bay, fishes of East Coast of North America, or coastal fishes of North America. I think they actually publish shark. They may. I don't think they do sharks of the world, but they do some pretty important shark field guides. So. Let's see. He wrote more than 300 papers on subjects ranging from fireflies to fishing spiders to jaguars and sharks. Like most of his fellow ichthyologists who were interested in only identifying and naming fishes, the eclectic Gudger wrote numerous papers about the habits of many bony fishes and sharks. Let's see. He's the first to conduct field studies of numerous elasmobranchs and wrote papers on the feeding habits of the great hammerhead, natural history notes on the sharks and rays of Beaufort, North Carolina, and the feeding habits of the tiger shark. His monograph on the spotted eagle ray remains the source document on the species. Wow. Gudger had a lifetime preoccupation with the whale shark, Rhynchodon typus, and wrote more than 40 papers on the species. Gudger was able to examine only one whale shark in his life, so many of his papers were just secondhand captured records for various localities. Although in 1952 some believed that whale sharks were oviparous, Gudger wrote, "One could not conceive such a giant laying eggs. Time would prove him correct, but it would take more than 4 decades for proof to be obtained." He also accurately anticipated that whale sharks grew rapidly long before any growth data was available. Here's that same beautiful illustration, side view of the frilled shark. Really incredible. Let's see. The dogfish oil industry. English colonists in America had no tradition for using sharks as food, though shark liver oil and skins were utilized through the colonial period. John Lawson, who explored the Carolinas around the 1700s, summed up the colonists' attitude and use of sharks in his A New Voyage to Carolina. Their livers make good oil to dress leather withal. The bones in their head are used to hasten birth and ease in stone by bringing it away. Their meat is eaten in scarce times, but I never could away with it, though a great lover of fish. The dogfish are a small sort of shark kind, and are caught with hook and line, fishing for drums. They say they are good meat, but we have so many other sorts of delicate fish that I shall hardly ever make trial of what they are. So, kind of a nice little a nod to the fact that sharks aren't good eating, really. Other fish are far more palatable than sharks, so. I'm just going to skip ahead, just to be mindful of time. The Ocean Leather Company, the large-scale utilization of sharks in the United States began with the Ocean Leather Company during the early part of the 20th century. Businessman Alfred Ehrenreich had been exploring the utilization of sea animals, sharks, rays, porpoises, small whales for commercial purposes. Ehrenreich contacted the Bendixen brothers of Copenhagen, Denmark, who had patented a method of tanning the hides of sharks and whales. At Ehrenreich's request, one of the Bendixen brothers came to the United States to arrange for the utilization of the patents and the production of leather from sharks and cetaceans. In the spring of 1917, Ehrenreich and Bendixen, all of a group of stockholders, launched the Ocean Leather Company to handle the American patent rights and products of the Danish tanning patents, as well as to investigate other potential products from sea animals, primarily sharks, such as oil, fertilizer, fins, etc. The Ocean Leather Company was incorporated on 18th of April 1917 in Delaware, of course, and started with a small experimental tannery on Tyler Street, Newark, New Jersey. So, fun fact about Delaware for our, if anybody doesn't know, Delaware is an interesting state where they have, if I'm not mistaken, they have very lenient tax laws, and I believe they have no sales tax. And so a lot of businesses, to this day, incorporate in Delaware for those benefits. So it just cracks me up that Ocean Leather Company, of course, is in Delaware. Delaware is kind of like the Panama, or actually no, I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if it's Panama or Bahamas. I think it is Panama. You know how like a lot of ships, American ships, are registered in Panama, which seems really strange. I think there's a similar thing going on with that. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but Delaware has very lenient tax laws, and that's part of why many businesses incorporate there. But anyway, this small facility was insufficiently equipped for attempting the necessary tanning experiments, and it was not until the summer of 1918 that tanner was properly equipped for work. At the time, the company was unable to produce remarkable shark leather because of the inability to remove the dermal denticles of the shark hides, which was described by Ehrenreich as being hard as steel. Oh, there's so much. This is like such a huge article, and it's so much information. So I'll repost it in the chat before we end today. But wow, it's kind of amazing how much history there is prior to Jaws. Like wow. The Bass Biological Laboratory. In 1932, John F. Bass Jr. founded the Bass Biological Laboratory in Englewood, Florida, because according to the brochure printed in the inauguration, there was no year-round collecting station in the eastern and midwestern United States south of Beaufort, North Carolina, and that would be advantage to have such a field laboratory located in Florida near the subtropical belt. This is exciting because today, I would say California too, but Florida really is the capital of shark science, at least in the United States. Florida has, I want to say, 3 or 4 major universities that are like pillars of American shark research. And it's no coincidence that a lot of Shark Week scientists are based in Florida. It's just, yeah, it's this is really cool to read. One of the first marine labs is in Florida. So its purpose was to furnish research facilities to investigators in biological fields where the fauna, flora, and climate play an important role in the problem under observation. Much of what was learned about sharks in the decade of the 1930s in the United States was learned at the Bass Marine Laboratory. In the 1930s, Englewood was a small town of some 200 souls in the splendid isolation of rural Florida of that era. Venice was the closest town that had the closest train station providing access and supply routes for the laboratory. The laboratory facilities were granted to faculty members of colleges, universities, and other institutions. A charge of $1 per day was assessed to researchers to pay for laboratory maintenance. It's remarkable to think about now. The laboratory had a profit-making subsidiary, the Zoological Research Supply Company, a biological supply company that sold live and preserved specimens to researchers and universities. In turn, this company had a department called the Genuine Shark Products Company that dealt in products such as shark hides, shark oil, and shark teeth jewelry. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna fast forward. Venice is a famous fossil shark tooth location. I've been to Venice once, and it's so developed now, and like it's kind of incredible to read that this was rural Florida at one point. It's like, wow. In a letter dated oh, thanks, Quackers. No worries. Gotta drop out, but had a great time. See y'all next week. Thank you for joining us. This was a really interesting episode, so I really appreciate you being here. And tune in next week for part 2, which is the world post Jaws. So, but until then, see you soon. I'm gonna keep reading for a little bit before we wrap up for tonight. In the letter dated 22nd of August 1939 to Charles Breder of the New York Aquarium, referring to a visit to the area, Springer wrote, "I did spend a full day at the Hammerheads National Museum, and I'm very much interested in seeing more from the New York area. The beasts fall into 5 categories, which may eventually be considered of a generic order. I suppose I'll be able to sort them out sometime." Oh, Howard, I love Venice Beach. Visit Shark Frenzy if you get there. That sounds super fun. I think I've heard of it before. Pretty famous event, but yeah, definitely love to check it out. Let's see. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna read. I didn't realize there was gonna be so much information, which is great. This is such a fantastic article. The shark liver oil fishery, 1938 to 1948. This was a major fishery in the United States, so we're going to kind of skip this. The U.S. Navy era, the shark chaser. In the 1930s, many people questioned whether sharks would attack men. Barely 2 decades before, there had been well-publicized shark attacks on humans off New Jersey in 1916, but these become questionable as there were many unanswered questions. There have been other publicized attacks on bathers in the late 1800s, but those have been forgotten. In 1937, the well-known ichthyologist E.W. Gudger of the American Museum of Natural History wrote an article titled "Will Sharks Attack Human Beings?" Where he stated that many people, including the noted Dr. William Beebe, doubted that sharks would attack humans. Although Gudger cited 2 clear cases of shark attacks and concluded his article with the statement, "Sharks sometimes do attack human beings," he expresses and others' beliefs that the barracuda was responsible for most alleged cases of shark attack. The naval engagements of World War I were fought mainly in the cold waters of the Northern Atlantic. Other naval battles taking place in other oceans and resulting in high casualties, for example the battles of Conroe and Falklands in 1914, also occurred in cold waters, and in most sinkings there were few or no survivors in those frigid waters. Life expectancy of a sailor in the cold waters was so brief that most perished of hypothermia before they could be rescued. The major naval battles of World War II occurred mainly in the North Atlantic and in the tropical Pacific. In the North Atlantic, it was primarily the battle of the U-boats against the Allied convoys, with relatively few engagements of surface forces in oceanic waters. The survivors of ships torpedoed had sunk at high latitude had poor chances of reaching a lifeboat and no chance at all if not pulled from the water in a short time, while the U-boat sailors seldom had a chance to escape their damaged underwater coffins. By contrast, the naval war in the Pacific Ocean and many U-boat attacks in the Caribbean Sea and the South Atlantic Ocean occurred in warm tropical waters where sailors could survive floating for many hours or even days while hoping for rescue. Rescued sailors and aviators often told of shipmates being attacked and consumed by sharks. Early in this war, military personnel knew that sharks were a definite problem for those who ended the battle floating in the ocean. In February 1941, anthropologist Henry Field of the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago was asked to serve as anthropologist to President Roosevelt, advising the president of the many refugee problems caused by the war in Europe, and as a member of the Special Intelligence Unit at the White House. In 1942, Field was asked to fly to Trinidad to investigate complaints regarding U.S. enlisted men there. After accompanying his mission, Field reminisced about his talks with torpedoed merchant seamen who had escaped from sharks. In his 1953 autobiography, Field wrote, "Night after night, I thought of those men in the water, holding onto rafts or upturned lifeboats or lying in rubber boats with sharks cutting through the water around them. I wrote the president a memorandum suggesting that we try to develop a shark repellent." Field was instructed to discuss the matter with the chief of the Bureau of Aeronautics on the U.S. Navy. Knowing little about sharks, Field called upon his friend, Harvard zoologist Harold Coolidge, then with the Office of Strategic Services, and the two discussed the problem. The two men then called on Admiral Ralph Davidson, chief of Bureau of Aeronautics, who became interested in the idea mainly from the psychological point of view. So these are little illustrations of, I think, shark sense. This is so interesting. Okay, I'm going to kind of skim through to hit Shark Sense, which I think is a publication. It looks like they developed potential shark repellents. The urgency of the times permitted only limited testing of the repellent, which was named Shark Chaser, but soon became a standard issue of survival gear for the services. The fears prompted the U.S. Navy in 1944 to issue a nonsense-filled pamphlet titled Shark Sense, designed to allay the fears of naval aviators concerning sharks. It concluded with the editorial comment of, "The natural conclusion is that the shark offers no unusual hazards to a swimming or drifting man. In fact, the chances that a man will be attacked by a shark or a barracuda are infinitesimal. It is doubtful that anyone took Shark Sense too seriously, and by the end of the war, numerous incidents demonstrated that sharks would attack floating sailors or downed aviators. Perhaps the most famous of these incidents was the sinking of the cruiser USS Indianapolis." We are familiar with Jaws, so we know this is what Quint talks about in the movie. The ship carried 1,196 men on board when it was torpedoed on the night of 30th July 1945. Some 400 men went down with the ship. Of the 800 men that went into the water, only 316 survived after 4 days of drifting in tropical water. Many were taken by sharks. The action reports of the rescuers left no doubt that sharks had been responsible for many of the deaths. One of the rescuers, the captain of the USS Helm, wrote, "About half the bodies were shark-bitten, some to such a degree that they were nearly resembled skeletons. From 1 to 4 sharks were in the immediate area of the ship at all times. At one time, 2 sharks were attacking a body no more than 50 yards from the ship and continued to do so until driven off by rifle fire." Subsequent editions of Shark Sense no longer said that the chances of shipwrecked sailors and downed airmen being attacked by sharks were infinitesimal. The 1959 version of Shark Sense extols the virtues of the Shark Chaser and its nigrosine dye cake that downed aviators were supposed to release into the water, with the assumption that it would repel sharks and hide the aviator from the shark's sight. It closed with, "Your best protection is your Shark Chaser. Sharks take one look at that magnificent black aura surrounding the downed pilot and recall urgent business elsewhere." In the decades following World War II, there were numerous reports concerning the ineffectiveness of Shark Chaser. In a report titled "Airmen Against the Sea," Lano analyzed a sample of 607 accounts of survival experiences after ditching at sea from 1940 to 1955. Lionel wrote that unfortunately narratives provided no evidence of shark chaser used under survival conditions with sharks present. Skin divers who have used to put little faith on it. Beyond question, the greatest value of the shark chaser was a mental relief and sense of security afforded to the men who had it on hand. Well, nevertheless, shark chaser remained in the military supply system until 1976 when it was discontinued based on recommendations from the Office of Naval Research. In his excellent review of the shark repellent problem, Baldridge in 1990 referred to shark chaser as a useful psychological crutch for the times. That is all it was, but its creation marked the beginning of research into sensory biology of behavior of sharks. Wow. So I think with that, because this incredible article, I'm going to repost it in the chat. It will go into Jaws, but I think this is a good place to leave off, especially since it does reference two inspirations for Jaws. There we go. One being the New Jersey shore attacks in 1916, and the other being the USS Indianapolis, which is used in the movie. So, but this was a really interesting stream that I really wasn't expecting this direction, because really like pre Jaws. There was a lot of different views of sharks, and many of them were referential. And tonight it actually went into a lot of the more inside history that I was actually not expecting. Where we saw these incredible ancient Aztec and Mayan depictions of sharks and ancient shark attacks. And then we see the Spanish history of shark attacks. Thank you, Howard. I really appreciate that. Spanish history of shark attacks. Early shark science is a little bit goofy until we start kind of getting into the 20th century. So much that we learned tonight, and also I think my favorite moment was just making the connection of the Caribbean monk seal going extinct and the subsequent decrease of the white shark in that area. So, but thank you, Howard, so much for the comment. Very cool live stream tonight. I really appreciate that, and I'm really glad that we got to cover this subject. There's clearly so much to learn, so I'm posting the article in the chat. So that we could talk about it, so that future viewers can read it, and we can talk about it more. But we're going to continue this series next week. We're going to do part 2, which is after Jaws, and we might have to do like a part 3 because there's clearly so much incredible information out there. So really excited to be able to share that with everybody tonight. So, but until then, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your week and continue to enjoy the warm weather. Spring is here. So we're going to see a lot of awesome marine migrations in the northern hemisphere. So right now down here it's going to be the herring, but following the herring are going to be the sharks, and I'm really excited about that. So but anyway, hope things are going well, and hope you have a great week. And I'll see you next week for part 2 of this series, which is going to focus on the world after Jaws. So we'll kind of see what's going on with that. But until then, take care, cheers, and have a good night.